Hi everyone, and welcome to iSolutions Power YouTube channel, where we explore the world of the Power Platform. My name is Sebastian, and I'm a Power Platform consultant here in Zurich for iSolutions. Today, we are diving into the fundamentals of variables and collections. Variables are an essential element in Power Apps that store and manage data, making your apps dynamic and interactive. So there are several types of variables in Power Apps, each serving different purposes. Let's take a closer look at it. First up, let's talk about the global variables. So global variables are accessible throughout the entire app. So they retain their value until the app is closed or until they are explicitly cleared. The scope of global variables is the app. These global variables are great for storing information that needs to be accessed from multiple screens or functions within your app. Global variables can also hold different values, for example, records, table, Boolean, text, or strings. The function to create global variables is the set function. We will look at this closer a bit later, where I show to you in the Power Apps Designer. Now let's shift our focus to the context variables. Context variables are specific to a screen or the context within your app. So be aware that the scope is not the whole app, but the screen where we are at the moment. So they are created and used within a particular screen and lose their value when you navigate away from that screen. Context variables are useful for storing, therefore, temporary data and values. While this may seem limiting, context variables offer several advantages, for example, improved memory efficiency. Again, in comparison to global variables, they can also hold multiple values or multiple types of values, for example, text, strings, numbers, or records. Let's move on to the collections. Collections are similar to a table in a database. So they store multiple records of data that can be manipulated and used throughout your app. Collections are often used to store data and retrieved from external sources or to organize data within your app. They are useful when working with large data sets or when you need to manipulate data before saving it in a permanent data source. The last thing I have here are the with is the with function. So as a last thing, I want to show you this function. This is a bit of a special function that allows you to perform multiple operations on a variable within a single expression. It simplifies complex formulas and makes your app more efficient by reducing redundancy. So you can think of a with function as a one-time variable. So they are not stored in memory. After the with function is executed, the variable is cleared from the memory of the app and cannot be accessed outside of this function. As I have already said, the with function is a special case and does not belong directly to the variables and collections in Power Apps. Therefore, I will not use them or explain them in this video, but it could be content of another video. So now that we have looked a bit into the theory of variables and collections, I will show it to you in the Power Apps Designer, how they are created, what are their differences, and when to use them. So the first thing I have here is a little app I created. We have one screen, and in this app, I want to show you the differences again of global variables and context variables when you create them. So as a first thing, I inserted here buttons, one for text variable, one for number variable, and also here one for creating multiple variables for global variables and also context variables. With this button, we want to create a variable. So we go into the on select of the button and then use, because we want to create global variables, we use the set function. We use round brackets, and in this set function, we insert our name of the variable. Maybe I can show it to you like this. You see we have two arguments that we want to insert. One is the name of the variable and one is the value. So for the name, I use global text, for example. Maybe as a best practice also to use a prefix when you create a variable, so you know if it's a global variable or a context variable. I use GLB for global variables and CXT for context variables, but this I will show you later. Now we have the name of our variable, and now we need to give it the value. For value, you can give it maybe hello everyone. We close the brackets, and now our set function is finished. When we click on the button, we see nothing. So for this, we add a label. This label has the text value of our global variable that we created. So in the text value of our label, we insert the name of our variable. Now we see we have here the value of the global variable. Another thing we can also do is when we set the variable, we can mark the name of the variable. And here we see two things. One is the type, which is in our case text, and the other one is the value, which is hello everyone. Let's move on to the number variables. This is again the same thing. We go to the onSelect of the button, use our set function, give it a name, global number, and then also give it the value. In my case, I use 50. Then I also insert another text label, and in the text value or the text property, I give it the name of our number variable. I haven't set the number variable. For this, I click on the button, and we see here the value of our number variable. Now, as a last thing, maybe you want to create one button where you set multiple variables. So when the user clicks on the button, multiple variables are created. How can you do this in global variables? You begin again with the set function. Maybe give it a name like global name, for example. Then I use my name, which is Sebastian. And you may think you can insert a comma and then also create another global variable. For example, global org, which could be solutions. But as you see, we get an error. And this error says that there is invalid number of arguments. So the set function received 4 arguments, but expects only 2. So you can only use the set function with 2 arguments. What can we do here now to create this button where we set multiple variables? We can use multiple set functions. So do it like this. So we have 2 set functions, one for global name and the other one for global org. Now let's add again 2 different labels. First one we give global name, and the second one, the text property, is global org. Let's click on the button, and we see we have created 2 global variables, one for my name, one for the organization. Let's switch to the right side where we create the same thing with context variables. So the first thing is to create a context text variable. So for context variables, we have seen we use the update context function. We go on the onSelect of the button and use the update context function. We open our round brackets, and attention here, we need also to open or create the curly brackets. And in these curly brackets, we insert our name of the context variable. So again, as practice, use prefixes. For me, it's CXT for context. And then add, for example, context text is our name, and then we insert how are you. So our update context function is now finished. So one simple difference, one little difference here is not to use the equal sign, because when we use the equal sign in creating context variables, we get an error. We must use the double points or the colon to create the variable. So we have our text variable, and we also need to insert another label to show the value. Context text. We click on the button, we see our value. Same thing goes for the number variable. So we use update context, open our round brackets, and also open our curly brackets. Now we add again the name, which could be context number, and give it a value. We then insert another label, and the text property we set to the name of our context variable. We click on it, we see we have here the value again. So let's move to the last thing here, which are creating multiple context variables when pressing one button. As we have seen here in the global variables, we had to use multiple set functions. Now you may think you also need to use multiple update context functions to create many variables or multiple variables. This is not the case. So this is one special thing also here with context variables or with the update context functions. Here you can create multiple context variables within one update context function. How you can do this? So you open the round brackets again, curly brackets, and in there we create our first variable, which could be context drink. In my case, it's water, and then use a comma and insert our next variable, context meal, which could be sandwich. So you see, we have one update context function and created two context variables. Then you can also insert two labels. Set the first text property to our drink and the second one to our meal. We click on our button and see our two context variables. So in this screen or in this app, you have seen the differences between creating global variables and creating context variables using the set function and using the update context function. Now we switch to a bit of a more complex use case where I also want to show you the collections and how to use them. So here we are in our second app where I want to show you a little use case and also, again, the differences between collections and how you can create them or use them. I have here the app with 3 screens. The first screen has 3 containers, one container for global variable, second container for context variable, and the third container for collections. What I do here is 3 times the same thing. So I want to create a calculator or a summation function where the user can input a number, click on add, and then, or input multiple numbers, and then the numbers get added. You can also see the sum here as a result. The difference is in the first container here, I use global variables to create this. In the second one, I use context variables, and in the third one, I use collections. Let's go into the first container, so to see how we created this case with global variables. We have here different controls. We have one text input where the user can input the number that he wants to add together. Then he has two buttons, one for adding the number and one also for clearing. So the thing or the idea is that if the user wants to clear all the inputs, he can press this button and clears the variable or the collection. What I also have here in the middle is the label where I want to show the result. When we look here at the add button, you can see here our set function. As you know, we begin with our name. So I've created the global variable running total, and then we have the value of our variable. And this is a bit special because we use our initial value of this variable and add together the input, so the number that gets inputted here by the user. So we have our current value of our global running total and add this add the inputted number to our running total. The clear button has also a set function where we use our running total, but then use the blank function. And with the blank function, we clear or we delete the whole global variable. So the variable is again 0 or blank, has no values in it. Let's test this. So the user can input a number, click on add, and now we see here the value of our running total variable. Then we can also import another number. We see here again the updated value. We can click on clear and you see it's blank. So there are no values in the variable anymore. For the demo, let's use again some numbers. When we look at the label here at the middle, we see we have here a text property where we have formatted text. So the sum is just a text. And then we insert our value for the running total, which in our case is 700. So this is how we created it with the global variables. Now let's switch to the context variables in the middle. We have again the same controls, text input, two buttons, and a label. When we look at the add button, we see we used the update context function. We give our context variable a name, running total, and then use the same inputs or the same values as with the global variables. So we use our current value of the variable and add to it the inserted or the input of the user from the text input. The clear function is also more or less the same. We use the update context function, give it our name of the variable, and then also use the blank function. So to clear the value of our variable. We can again test this for so this is the value of our context variable at the moment. Then we add 60. We see we get 100 because the current value gets the inputted value of the user gets added to the current value. So when the user inputs 200, we see we get the result of 300. We can also clear this. And again, when we look at the text label, we see we have this formatted text where we insert the value of our context variable. Now, as a last step, look at the collections. For the collection, for this container, we have the same controls. When we look at the add button again, we see here we use the collect function. This is a special function for collections where we collect multiple values and store them in a collection. How this works is that we first need to create or to insert a name of our collection. Again, here I use for collections the prefix col, so I know this is a collection. Then I give it a name, summation, for example, add a comma, and then insert the value that should get added to our collection. In our case, it's this text input right here. So every number that gets inserted here in the text inputs, when the user clicks on add, it gets added to our collection col summation. The clear button is pretty simple. Here we use the clear function. This is also a specific function for collection. What this does is pretty simple. It clears all the value in the collection. So when you use clear function and you press the button, you have no values anymore in this collection. Again, in the brackets, we insert our name of the collection that we want to clear. Let's test this. So, for example, we use 50. Our collection now has one record or one value in it, which is 50. And we add 70. Now we have 2 records or values, and so on. So I can insert again multiple numbers and see here the sum of these numbers. A special thing also here with collections is that when we mark our name of the collection, we see the data type is table, and then we can also look at all the records. For this, we click on this little arrow here and see here all the records that are stored or saved into the collection. We have a table with column value, and in this column we have our values. So you can see here a bit of a history of the inputted values, beginning that the user started with 50, then inserted 70, 100, and so on. This is special because you cannot use this with global or context variables. With these 2 variables, you can only see the end result, so the sum of these numbers. With the collection, you can look at the history of the inputted values. Then let's look at our label. So this is a bit of special also, because here we use a sum function, and this we need to use when we want to sum multiple values in a collection, because we have a table. So this table has, as I said, 1 column in it, which is value, and there are all our numbers. Therefore, we need to use the sum function, and in the sum function, we add our name of the variable and then also use our column that we want to sum, where we want all the numbers in it to sum together. Then we get the result of 350 in our case. So with this, you have seen the differences in using global variables, context variables, and collections. What are the advantages when using collections? Now I want to show you again the scope of global variables and context variables. For this, I need to give again the running total a number. So global running total has now the value of 700. Context variable running total has no value. For this, we add some numbers. And now we see our context running total has the value of 320. Let's move on to screen 2. So screen 2 has 2 labels. Now I want to add again a label for the global running total and for the context running total. So we are now in another screen, and we want to show the value of our variables. It's pretty easy. You can use the global running total, the name of our global variables, and get the value right here. So it's 700. That is correct. Maybe you want to do the same thing with the context variable. Again, here, use the name of our context variable, which should be context running total. But you see we get an error. And this error is because we are in another screen. So we are not in the same screen where the context variable is created. And therefore we get an error. As I've said earlier in the theory, the context variables have the scope of one screen. So you cannot use them in another screen. This is very important to know. So therefore we get here this error. For example, if we do the same thing in the screen where we created the context variable, so you can see it here, we have used here the update context function where we created the context running total. When we insert here a new text label and then insert in the text property our name of our context variable, it works. So in one screen, when you are at one screen, context variables are fine. When you need to use the variable in multiple screens or in other screens, you cannot use this with the context variables. You need to use global variables. Maybe a workaround when working with context variables is using them in the navigate function. This I want to show you, and for this I need to add a button. We give it another text, navigate to screen 3, and also use the color red. So as you have seen in the overview, you can use context variables within the navigate function. This is a thing I also want to show you because it's very useful when passing context variables to another screen. So this is a specialty when using context variables. On the on select of the button, we use our navigate function. And you can see here we need to, the first argument is the target screen. So we need to give the navigate function the screen where we want to navigate to. In our case, it's navigate 3. Then we use a comma and see the transition. So here we can give the navigate function a transition. So we see it's a bit of fancy thing to do. Let's maybe use screen transition fade. Then again use a comma, and this is the third argument of the navigate function, which is context. As you can read it here, an optional context record to be passed to the target screen. So here we can again create a context variable. This is then passed to our screen 3. For example, we need to use the curly brackets again because we are creating a context variable, and then give it a name, context animal, and say it's a cat. We need to close our round brackets. With this, our navigate function is finished. We can test this and click on the button. Now we are navigated to our screen 3. You can see it right here. We are in our screen 3. Here I have again a text label. I insert another label to show the value of our passed context variable, which is context animal. And you see here it's a cat. So this is one important thing also. We created the context variable in another screen within the navigate function and showed it in the target screen. I can also use here dog, and again press the button and see here the result or the value of our context variable. So remember, you can use context variables in navigate function to pass them to another screen. So the last thing I want to show you is a quick overview in the Power Apps Designer of all the variables and all the collections that are used in the app. For this, we go here into our tabs where we have the tree view, the insert, the data, and here you can also see a variables tab. When we click on it, we see it's categorized in global variables, context variables, component variables, and collections. So this is pretty useful when you have a lot of variables and want to look at a specific one. Then you can use the variables tab here. For example, go into global variables, and you see we have one global variable in our app, which is the running total. We can also click on the arrow here and see the definitions of this variable. So we can see the formulas where this global variable is created or defined. One is in the add button, where we use the set function, and the other one is in the clear button, where we also use the set function. We can switch to the uses and see direct uses or indirect uses. Direct uses, you can see it here in our label, where we showed or printed our value of the global variable, and also here in the set function, where we use the current value of the variable. And also here in screen 2, where we also printed the value. Same thing goes for global variables. These are categorized for screens. As you know, the scope is for context variables are screens. We can go to screen 1 and see we have here one variable, one context variable. Can go again into the definitions and see we used here in the add button the update context function, and also in the clear button the update context function. Again, we can go to uses and see direct uses or indirect uses. We see here the value, and also used here the value of our context variable. The third category is component variables. We haven't used them in our app, so there are no component variables defined. And the last thing are our collections. You have seen we have one collection, which we used here in this container here when we created our summation case. You can also look at this collection when we click on the 3 dots and click on View Table. Now we get better visualization of our collection and see again that it's a table with one column, which is value, that stores all the numbers that I inputted earlier. So very useful using the variables tab here in the Power Apps Designer to get an overview of all the global variables and all the context variables and the collections in the app. You can also search for a specific name, for example, animal, and I know here I see my update context, my context variable animal. So again, also search function, very useful when you want to search for a specific variable. So, and there you have it, an overview of variables and collections in Power Apps. By mastering the use of variables, you can create more dynamic and interactive apps that meet the specific needs of your users. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Power Apps and Power Platform videos. Feel free to leave a comment or a question below, and I see you in the next video.